Hey there viewers, my name's Torinski and welcome back to another DCSS Sunday where we are finally, after over a month now, finished with halflings. Got a victory there, super proud of Waffling for finally making it through our cursed species. But more so, we're moving on, or more than that, we're moving on to Troll, who I'm hoping should be a little bit easier. There are some complicated things with Trolls. They can be a little bit misleading in their abilities just because you have so much health, but you still have a bit of a lack in defensive capabilities at the start, which we'll definitely be getting into as we jump into game here. But still definitely looking forward to it and excited to jump into something new here. So without further ado, let's do so, shall we? We'll start up the game here. We won't choose our name quite yet because I'm not fully certain on which route we want to take with our troll. There are a couple of kind of preferable choices for going in with our first run here, especially if we're looking for a pretty consistent start to get us off the ground here right away. But if we pop in, we can take a quick look at the aptitudes for a troll here. They definitely have a bit rough in terms of most of their aptitudes, which we'll see right away. All of the defensive ones here, especially stealth, not so great. Even their invocations, their evocations, unfortunately not fantastic, since that's something that I always seem to rely on a decent amount for getting us through some tougher parts. But the huge boons and bonuses for trolls come in this category right here, plus 30% to health. So we're definitely going to have a nice big health pool. Gets a little bit easier to make some mistakes, especially in the earlier part of the game. This won't help us quite as much when everything's just tormenting us and taking off chunks half at a time, but we'll have to deal with that problem when we get there. And you know, I'm actually blanking, what are these? Right, MP experience and willpower. So a little bit less magic points and experience than normal. Nothing too bad there though. And willpower is pretty much average for most characters. And then when we go down to fighting, we see that, again, mostly negative aptitudes until we get to unarmed, because one of the huge selling points of Troll is their Clause 3 mutation right off the bat. It's a huge amount of damage, plus a little bit of a bonus to hit as well, so that's going to be probably consistent throughout the game, is us attacking with unarmed combat. Especially, yeah, for a 3-run game, there's almost no reason not to go out of it, unless we find an absolutely incredible artifact or something like that early on. We'll have to see how that goes, and then finally, range things not so great besides throwing, which again is probably a selling point for trolls, seeing as how our large size allows us to throw large rocks, which is definitely the highest damage throwing item in the game, and even with no training can usually take out quite a few enemies right off the bat in the early dungeon, so that could definitely come in handy. Then finally we get to our spell casting here, and this is where trolls truly are down in the dirt in terms of their aptitudes. We're not likely to go into spellcasting too much in a 3-rune game, but of course in this game in general, a low aptitude doesn't necessarily mean that we're totally cut off from that section. It just means a bit more commitment in terms of experience, which may not be that hard when we're not training a weapon very much. We honestly aren't going to be training quite as many defensive capabilities, because trolls also are unable to wear most types of armor. That will likely come into play a bit later in the game once we get to troll leather armor or maybe a dragon scale of some kind. But yeah, that pretty much sets up what we'll be going into here. So usually what I'd like to do with a troll is start as either a berserker, keeps things nice and straightforward. I was thinking of doing this in the first place just for a bit of an ode to old time's sake, because troll berserkers were probably the very first combo that I learned how to get off the ground when I started playing this game over a decade ago. But as of late, I've been leaning more and more towards the troll hunter start, because as a hunter you get to start your game with a couple of large rocks in your inventory, which does come in handy for taking care of maybe an early unique that you come across, or even your first, out-of-depth ogre or double-headed ogre maybe even. So I start to get a little more tempted to go that direction. And now I've put myself in a tricky situation where I don't know what I feel like doing, but I think because I've been kind of leading up to it, we will go the berserker route, at least to start out here, see how it goes in the early game, especially since the other thing of note for this run in particular here is that we are jumping in to the new version of the game, 0.27. So there have been a decent number of melee changes, makes it the slightest bit harder to get off the ground in the early game as a melee-oriented character, but that shouldn't stop us too much. As we see from even the description of the Berserker class here, not much can stop Raging Berserker early on apart from Hubris. So as long as we're careful, cautious, making sure we use our Berserk at the right moments, then we should be able to make it through, using our extra little bit of health to keep us alive. So let's do it. And we'll definitely just go in with our claws, get a little bit of extra unarmed skill right off the start here, and finally come up with a name. I'm not feeling super creative yet, so we might fall back on the old naming convention of just combining TR for troll and BE is the other bit. So we will throw in an extra vowel here just to make it a bit more of a consistent name. And I think we might just go with Trobe. Trobe the Troll. Nice and simple, no problems whatsoever. And here we go. Let's get ready, to hop in here. A couple things right off the bat to note for a troll are some of our starting aspects. If we hop into our mutations here, so we have those large claws that we talked about. This is the claws 3 mutation, the third step down that tier, which does mean that they're pretty incredible in terms of damage. It's something like +6 to damage and +2 to hit, if I had to guess. I looked at the wiki the other day just to refresh myself on some of the mechanics. The other thing here is that we are too large for most types of armor. That limits us to just robes, animal skins, and then troll leather armors, of course, and dragon scales late game. So it's a disadvantage for the first part of the game here, but as soon as we get to depths, if we can manage to survive until then, have a decent number of tools at our disposal, then we should be able to start taking advantage of the dragon scale armor and really get our defenses up there to match our normally large health bar, which is pretty sweet. Finally, we also get a nice little batch or boon to let's just reset that. We get a nice bonus to our regeneration here, which means at any point during a really horrible fight, if we can pillar dance and run away, there's a decent chance that we can just slowly but surely regain all of our health before re-engaging with that enemy. And we also start with some fur, thick hide, a bit of extra AC to supplement the fact that we're not going to be wearing any armor in the early game. So, with that out of the way, let's prepare to hop in here. Go through the usual things, and in terms of our skills, I think I will take off most of our defensive things for now and really crank up that unarmed combat. Want to try and get our swing speed up as fast as possible, as well as our base damage with that, since it probably will be consistent and carrying us through the entirety of our 3-rune game. And we also want to pop up into auto pickup, of course, and picking up all the throwing things as usual. Especially this time, we get to go pick up all the large rocks that we find lying around, which is definitely handy. I guess on top of large rocks, we're also able to use giant clubs and giant spiked clubs. Not that that is as useful, again, with our incredible unarmed claws, but still might come into play, or even just for fun, we can pop one on, because it's not often you get to carry something that huge around. Thank you so much for the good luck wish, Inan. I'm hoping we can get this troll up and running fairly easily here. The nice part about trolls, again, is that large health pool. But I'm worried about my own inexperience with some of the new melee changes, so we'll have to see how she goes. And we are completely off. At the very least, the first level of the dungeon shouldn't be too much trouble. There are some other species background combos that would have issue with even the first couple of armed kobolds you come across here with the new changes, but we have a decent starting place at the very least, and it's going to be around D3, D4 when we start maybe being concerned about some out-of-depth monsters showing up, maybe even some early scare uniques that we don't want to face. We'll burn that bridge when we get to it. And I also like to be a little deprecating towards our chances here, so that just maybe we can trick the RNG fates into giving us some very fortuitous encounters here. But another kind of sticking point for our troll is going to be when we get to lair, because one thing that I forgot to mention in our brief little intro to the species is the fact that with claws 3, that counts as a long-bladed weapon, which means hydras become very interesting. We're hoping to, by that point, have some good throwing options, maybe even some good evocations up. if just to avoid adding too many heads as we slash away with our giant claws here. You are a troll and have plate armor on D1? Thanks, Dungeon. Of course we do, and I'm sure that magical chainmail that we left behind was probably like a +5 chainmail of willpower, because that's just the way the game is. But we should be fine overall. We do, as a troll, have pretty ridiculously low intelligence, down to 3 off the bat, without any crazy mutations bringing us down to such a low stat. Back in the day, that would usually mean that I'd want to invest maybe a couple points into intelligence early on here, just because stat death was such a big thing. Fortunately, it's a little more lenient in these later editions of the game, just in terms of not instantly dying on a stat 0, and instead just getting some negative effects placed on us that we can hopefully survive long enough, just until we can maybe add a point into intelligence, maybe get rid of whatever kind of effect is causing that dip in the first place. We'll see how it goes. I'm gonna berserk against the early adder here, just to make sure that we don't get too poisoned. I don't want to be blind chugging potions right off the bat here. It's nice to have an early panic button. That's one of the beautiful things about berserkers for sure, is just how early we have that panic button, as long as, again, we're a bit cautious. We don't want to be slowed down and get swarmed by enemies the second our berserk ends. And yeah, you're a fan of food-themed trolls? Egg troll, Kelly troll, troll wheat, cinnamon troll, tootsie troll, fruit troll up. Love it. Fruit troll up, the candy that keeps on giving. Absolutely fantastic. If for whatever reason we're not able to make it through with Trobe here, I'll definitely have to get a little fanciful with the names and have a bit more fun. My creative brain wasn't fully engaged as we started today, because it's a little bit late getting set up, but thank you always for the fantastic name suggestions, Safid. It helps me out a whole lot on my side, having that out of the way. And okie dokie. One of the nice things about the newest edition of the game here, 0.27, is that items are fully identified just upon picking them up, but actually just stepping over them gives you the information. So that does allow us to save all of our identify scrolls for getting some early potions of use, or maybe even some early acquirement scrolls if we're very fortuitous here. We'll have to see how it goes, of course. And I'm just crossing my fingers that we also run across some early large rocks, because I would like to have those online as soon as possible. Because as I mentioned off the top, even with 0 training in throwing, a large rock is going to absolutely smash a lot of these early threats in the dungeon. But of course, we are at the whims and mercies of the game here, so we'll have to see how she goes. We've already advanced to the point where an adder is absolutely no problem, is completely shredded by our claws, and this is kind of where the game simplifies for the time being. Unless we run into something scary, of course, as briefly touched on earlier, which can start any time now. You never know when your D3 is going to be an absolute disaster zone. Oh, Faded Altars. It's a very interesting tournament game. My only win in the tournament so far was an Orb of Zot, thanks to one of those Faded Altars. Gotta love them. Here we go. That could have been a little bit tougher. Even the first enemies with a trident, now with the melee changes, can be a bit brutal, even though the halberds are what we're truly going to be shaking in our boots for. And hey, how did the Zomptopus go? Anyone know? It's an absolute mystery. I'm not going to spoil anything here, because it was definitely, I should say, a wild ride in all regards. But if you want to watch those, the VODs are up on Twitch, or I plan on porting them over to YouTube over the next week here as well. And onwards we go. With a lot of the lower HP classes, you're going to be super scared of the first Orc Priests you get, but fortunately, because our AC doesn't matter in the slightest against those Orc Priests, we're able to just take advantage, or full advantage, of our plus 30% experience, and see how it goes. But here we go. Halberd Gnolls are one of the early killers in the dungeon here. In fact, I even took an extra step towards them, but fortunately don't need to dip into our rage. We absolutely killing already. I guess maybe if we'd found it on D2, we might have been in a slightly more risky, dangerous position, but as is, not much to worry about. And in fact, probably be able to tab through for a little bit is what I was going to say. But would you look at that, just as I go to preach just that. Sigmund pops out of nowhere. Hasn't seen us yet, so I will just retreat for the time being. But between his ability to go invisible, spells he can shoot out, and that nasty scythe, might want to be a little bit cautious of our first encounter with our favorite early game unique. There we are. One nice thing is that we have upgraded to Trog's Hand. So we haven't talked too much about Trog yet, besides the first bonus you get, which is the ability to go berserk. But at the end of the day, Trog's Hand here, which we get at 2 pips of piety, is probably one of the best abilities in the game. It's a bit more subtle because their generation, you might not notice just how much it saved in your life, but the main use for it is the ability to gain willpower through a god-given ability, because so often in games, you're, struggling in that middle section of the run where you're just missing some of those crucial resistances that you really need just to get, through that unique that's going to banish you, or through those first few wizards that you come across that might paralyze you. But in the case of Trog, we have some built-in anti-mage synergy, and so we're able to use this to kind of cheat the system and maybe give us a little piece of the puzzle that otherwise might be a little bit complicated to find. So I think we'll use that right away, but we'll check over on our friend Sigmund here just to see what we might be preventing. So confuse, definitely want to try our best not to have to deal with that. And your generation, I guess, will just help in general. So I will, right off the bat here, just to make good use of it, pop that Trog's Hand. We could also immediately rage. Just try and finish this fight as soon as possible. The only scary part there is if Sigmund goes invisible and we're just completely unable to hit with our slashes, we might make it all the way through our berserk before killing said unique here. So it's a risk that we have to keep in mind, but it will speed us up, allow us to close the distance here, and hopefully we just have to get in a few hits. Perfect. And that's a nice boost to our experience right away here in the early game. We also, as a troll, get a point of strength every 3 levels, as well as us putting into wherever we'd like, so we can really ramp up that strength score at a pretty wild pace. And hello, Robin. Yet another unique. Definitely wanted to check here, because if Robin was carrying a wand, it might be a little bit scary, but as is, I'm pretty sure no matter how many hobgoblins you throw at us, we will absolutely destroy them. So let's just go through this, and in fact, seems like the RNG of monster placement here truly helped us, seeing as how Robin was cut off from the majority of their reinforcements. That's truly unfortunate for all of you kiddos, but I'm happy to take advantage of each and every little bit of fortune the dungeon will eke out at us. And there we go. If they were a little bit smarter, they might have ran around the top, but again, no complaints here, and I'll take it. This is a place where it might seem tempting to just berserk right away, but even against weak enemies, I don't want to find myself becoming slowed too early on in the fight, especially with the possibility for a bunch of more monsters to come tumbling in afterwards. No, as I say so, I'm immediately thrown into a bit of a conundrum there where I could have berserked just to get to that knoll a little bit sooner. But fortunately, no need whatsoever. We can just slowly but surely slash our way through their ranks, finish the job. While looking at our inventory here, we've already gained a pretty surprising list of scrolls. So as soon as we're done this floor here, I think we're going to start reading up some of those bad boys and seeing if there are any more early game advantages we can eke out of this whole thing. I do want to wait for the new floor at the very least though, just in case we have a magic mapping that might help us out. Who knows, maybe there's a timed gate right down there. Hello, Halberd Knolls, very scary. Oh, and hello, UF. In fact, let's go back, I want to say hi. Oh, and actually see your new art as well. So all the Knolls got changed, so even Yef here, Youth, never said your name out loud. feel like, or if I have, I just never think about it when I say it normally. Youth. Seems about right. Something like that. I'd always like to say hello to him, even though that's one of the special creatures in the dungeon that I don't like to kill unless I absolutely have to. It's unfortunate the youth is completely trapped in that little room there forever, but I also don't feel quite right putting him out of his misery. Somewhere in the middle zone there. Decided you wanted to have a bit more health for your next run, I see. Yes, and in fact we are just, in this series, going straight down the list top to bottom. So trolls were always coming up next, which, don't get me wrong, very happy to take advantage of a bit more survivability early on here. It's pretty nice. Should also mention that our order has been just a little bit messed up in an interesting way, because Poundtongas, with the upgrade to 0.27, got moved from intermediate into the simple column and kind of slotted in a bit earlier than where we'd already passed in our progress. So I think to settle that and just make it a bit more straightforward, I'm going to finish off the rest of the simple species that we were already on track for, and then add Poundtonga to the bottom of that before we switch over to the intermediate and see how things go in the future. But yes, I'm very excited to have a bit more straightforward of a run at the very least here. Might even be able to finish this run in a day if we're fortunate and don't have to spend too long dancing around certain problems that we may or may not run into in the mid-game. Which of course is never a guarantee, but we'll have to see. Of course, we get all of the boots, all of the gloves as well, every piece of armor we can't possibly use. You'll love to see it. But not too bad whatsoever. I did also completely forget to check my scrolls, so maybe I'll do that, because I tell myself again to like, we'll finish this level and then on the way down we can do it. But I'll forget. If we're being honest with ourselves, I'm going to forget. So let's just get this out of the way, shall we? And in fact, we do start with 9 scrolls of identify, which you love to see. So let's start first through all of our potions. See if we can't find ourselves an early heal wounds, an early curing, especially, just in case we do get poisoned out of our gourd here. Doesn't look like it so far, though. Not to say that not in a horrible spot, or not to say that we're not in a good spot, I should say, with 2 haste potions right off the bat. Love to see it. And look, if you get red dragon scales and go claws, you don't name yourself Santa Claus. I don't know what to tell you. I truly wish that we could go through with a legal name change process in the game, because you're not wrong. Definitely not wrong. Get into some hardcore editing of our morgue just to give ourselves a new name after we get out of here victorious, of course, because that's how this run is going to end. No doubt in my mind. And let's see, one more identify scroll. Ooh, and we do get scrolls of blinking. We've already identified our scrolls of fear and our scrolls of blinking. So that's going to give us all the escape options we could possibly need for the first section of the game. Which just means it's that much more embarrassing when I run myself into an early grave, of course. But we'll see how she goes. Confusion, not the end of the world whatsoever. Perfect. It is a wee bit scary, don't get me wrong. With no curing potions at this stage in the game, we don't want to get too many horrible status effects, whether that be poison, confusion, or what have you. But again, we do have the extra bit of health pool to get us through those problems. So just onwards we go. It's weird, with a lot of these runs, I feel like I have a lot to talk about in terms of mechanics, what we're doing, what we're going to do, but there will come a section in this run where I'm probably just going to be tabbing through absolute hordes of enemies without a care in the world. At least ideally. Ooh. Game almost made me want to eat my words right away as we run into our first 2-headed ogre. So 15 and a giant spike club, plus 20 and a giant club. So if we're truly unlucky here, this could be like a 2-3 turn, at least almost death to us, if not completely delete us from this world. So we have a couple of options. We could try and soften this buddy up with some early javelins here, which isn't a horrible idea, or try also to use up our early charges of Mind Blast. Having 24 of these just off the bat here is pretty nice, with the caveat that we want to save some of these for dealing with Hydras, because as we mentioned, we do need to get a little bit more creative with our Hydra slaying at that stage in the game. Let's try it out. At least one of those. See how it hits. Definitely not bad. Let's go for a little bit more of a softening up here. And just one more blast. 4 of those total. And I may even just Berserk Rage right off the start of the fight here. Make sure we end that combat before it has any chance to start sliding downhill. And perfect. Maybe we'll even check in with our skills here. Unarmed, already up to 9.6, just shooting up there in terms of experience gained. And let's see. Even if we don't change anything on this skill screen, it's nice to have a bit of a mental idea, a mental map of sorts to where we might want to go throughout the rest of the run. For most melee characters, throwing and evocations are pretty much guaranteed going to be trained at some point for me. Even with that -3 in evocations, it's most likely going to be worth it to at least put a few points in there at some stage. And though we won't get any good armor right away, we could train a bit of dodging just to give us that little bit of extra insurance that we make it to the point in the game where we might be able to upgrade our armor. So that's definitely, or those definitely are things to keep in mind here as we continue. One of the lovely parts about becoming a berserker with our trolls is the fact that Trog requires no invocations training in order to get all of their abilities off the ground. So that does simplify things a little bit in terms of our experience allocation for sure. And so it continues. Besides that 2-headed ogre, absolutely nothing of note really happening here. We're getting 2 strength every 3 levels here, which is going to absolutely magnify the amount of damage we're dealing with our claws very quickly throughout the early stages of the game. And I guess I should have probably put on one of these necklaces, huh? The Guardian Spirit is a beautiful find early on our troll here, because we're most likely not going to be using that magic points or those magic points for anything else whatsoever. And so may as well just have a little bit more health on top of what we already have. That's even another 10%. So we're essentially at plus 40% health now. Absolutely ridiculous survivability. Even the first centaur that we run into providing no challenge whatsoever. And of course, because after such a string of misfortunes with our halflings, the game just has to give everything to us here and give us the luckiest run ever. We find ourselves with the Ring of Oniani here. So resistance to electricity and resistance to poison, dex +6. Holy crap. Just our luck and our poison on their own are enough to make me comfortable for the entire midsection of the game here, as that will probably get us through lair in one piece. It's not often that you get exactly the resistances you need before you're even close to the stages in the game in which they will become necessary. Though as always, I'm not complaining, game. Definitely not complaining. We also don't have to worry too much about those shallow water bits, because even though our movement is still slowed by shallow water, we at the very least can attack at normal speed just because of the sheer size of our troll here. Which you love to see. Oh my gosh, this is just ridiculous. 3 blinking scrolls, and there's that resistance artifact ring, of course. Again, just can't help but mention that. Off to an extremely solid start. Not that it's ever solid enough that I couldn't possibly throw it away in some ridiculous series of events, but definitely helps out in that regard at the very least. So we'll keep going here. Not getting too cocky. We don't want to start sprinting towards centaurs without a care in the world. You never know when a few bad rolls might change the tide of things. And while I'm very much happy with all of the early bits of escape and equipment that we've gone here, don't want to push the limits too far, because again, the game itself said that hubris is our one downfall in the early game with the Berserker. So let's try and appreciate that, protect ourselves, and play it safe. Though the luck does just continue here with a ridiculously good wand shop, huge amounts of charges. As long as we're able to get a decent chunk of change, this will probably be our Hydra killer right here. Just this shop alone can take out any number of nasties. So holy crap. Thank you, game. Absolutely no complaints on my part. Can't believe we're already completely ready for lair on D7 here. Even these orcs I'm not too concerned with, and we'll just tab our way through. Haven't had to berserk too often, which we do like to see. The less often we have to use that, the more consistently we get to play, because it's always during those when the raid subsides, sorry, is when we have to be a little bit more cautious than we otherwise might be. Not too bad. Orc nearby, still just pick up stuff. And here we go. This gets a little bit more interesting finally. Can run down here, and as much as I'm confident with our sheer amount of hit points here, I still probably don't want that Orc Priest railing smites on us from above here. So I wouldn't mind getting a little bit closer to that son of a gun. And I need to decide on some things here. I don't want to rage necessarily, because if we rage too early in this fight, all these berserking bears will completely rampage us. So let's maybe be slightly aware of that, while still having the ability to just kind of run away here, use our regen, and potentially split up the worst parts of the fight. We don't want the orc warrior railing on us at the same time that we're getting smited from every angle. All these creatures are breaking through the bushes and starting to surround us from every which way. Instead, we'll just come back to this nice corridor and take you on, one by one, just the way that Trog intended. There we go. Now we'll be tabbing through everything, absolutely shredding whatever was invisible here. Orc wizard? Maybe? Sky beast? We'll never know, I guess. That's the common problem with trolls, is you're just too strong, you know, too powerful. Even making a stupid mistake and walking directly into the fire of 2 yaks. Who gives a dang? Absolutely ridiculous. And maybe for this 2-headed ogre, now that we're a little bit further along here, have a nice amount of hit points under our belt, I might try out a few different strategies, in this case switching over to javelins, seeing just how much damage we can get laid on with this. Dang, unfortunately can't hit you both at the same time. That's fine. We'll make do, I guess. Instead, just have to wait a turn to do so. And okay. Remember all that talk about hubris? Let's not fall victim to that, shall we? Because we see just how much damage we can take in a single turn against this bad boy. So, could Brothers in Arms. It's a nice ability that brings us in an ally, which we can then use to potentially hold enemies back while we run away a bit, which isn't too bad. If we're truly scared here, I should say, then we can definitely just run away now, start our little pillar dancing routine, and shouldn't have too much trouble just regenerating our health slowly but surely. But I think I'm willing to go for an early berserk here. Can always blink scroll out if things get truly nasty. So let's give it a go. Try and finish off this buddy in just a couple hits. 3 hits, that's fine. Still luckier than I probably have any right to be. And of course we do need to calm down first before auto-exploring. That's a mistake that I constantly make as I get much too hasty. It's a good thing the game helps us out there, because otherwise you definitely don't want to be running into new encounters while slowed after your berserk. That's just silly. And let's see, the bee poison even getting through our little bit of poison resistance, but nothing we can't handle, at least in a little group this small. I was trying to remember, or think, what is a group of bees? A swarm. Of course, it's a swarm. It's getting way too fancy with the examples my brain was trying to come up with as to how to describe groups of animals. And, ooh, okay. Trog is already starting to gift us weapons here. Unfortunately, we probably won't end up using any of them. So sorry, Trog. I know you're just trying to help, but I do love me my claws. And at the end of the day, they're probably going to get the job done on just about anything. Even Orbs of Fire can be absolutely shredded by just the Claws 3 mutation by the end game. Provided, of course, that you have some other necessary features, like some resistance to fire, of course, is always beneficial in that situation. But onwards we go. Not having to worry too much about these buddies. Oh, geez. Net almost changing that as we had to spend more turns than I would have liked breaking out of it. I think this giant-ass troll would have a little bit more ease with such a flimsy net, but of course, RNG will always find a way, hey? And there we go. Through D8, we do have our lair entrance here, which is nice to see for sure. And we've managed to pick up one more identify scroll as well. So let's read that now. Potentially finding our curing potions. Ooh, heal wounds. That's even better. 5 heal wounds potions. Absolutely incredible for this stage of the game. Love to see it. So I think I'll do one more floor of the dungeon here. In fact, we'll even bring you buddies upstairs just in case things go south. But we'll do one more floor of the dungeon before we dip into lair. Just so that we may find a slightly, or some more, I should say, solutions for our potential Hydra problems that we'll run into down there. Of course, even an early flame artifact might be worth using temporarily here, just to make sure that we do have some way of getting rid of those Hydra heads. And this fight is probably one for a Berserk, just because I want to try and finish off those stronger enemies as quickly as possible. Perfect. Onwards we go. Already a bunch of shops to be found in the dungeon, and oh my gosh, even a Cloak of Willpower for sale. Only 181 gold? That's madness. That's an amazing item. I'm just going to buy that now. Even with Trog's Hand, why not give us the ability to go up to 4 pips of willpower? Absurd. And I guess we see one of the other slight disadvantages of a troll here. We're too big to use a buckler. Fortunately, it means that a kite shield and a tower shield are that much easier for us to use with our large size, but we won't get to take advantage of those early bucklers here. And wow, we even get one of my favorite cloak colors, the bright magenta. I always like to say, we want to make a splash in the dungeon. We want to be bold, stand out amongst the other adventurers, you know? Especially on a troll. I mean, if you have a -5 aptitude in stealth anyway, why the heck not? And here we go. Another one of these bad boys. We did learn in our last fight that it's maybe not as straightforward, even now as I otherwise might like. So if we wanted to be truly careful here and consistent, can use some Curari just to keep the gap between us and this enemy. The nice slow from that poison doing absolute wonders for the first couple ogre enemies you find. And in fact, we can kind of layer these on top of each other, maybe even using some of the regular poison darts as well to supplement that. Not too bad. Keeps us out of danger. Let's not risk dying to a few unlucky rolls, shall we? But that's about it. Onwards we go. Just absolutely slaughtering everything in the early dungeon here. It's definitely a nice change of pace from what I'm used to, not only in our last game in this series as halflings, or I guess last set of games as it were, but even compared to our first couple tournament rounds, which have been a bit sketchier to get off the ground, to say the very least. Instead, just absolutely shredding. So confident, in fact, that I'm going to go through one more level of the dungeon, just seeing what kind of other advantages we may be able to eke out in terms of our journey into lair. Guess with the risk that we are running into some early drakes here, but would you look at that, we do also find a nice pair of dragon scales. So this is exactly what we were hoping for, and we'll finally get a bit of AC on our side. Oh my gosh, even a troll? Troll leather armor maybe? Wow, so lucky. So now we actually have a hard decision to make. We could go with the troll leather armor, give us even more regeneration, which is pretty incredible. We still gain 2 AC out of this. Not a bad stretch, or bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. Or we can go for the slightly better AC and corrosion resistance. Encumbrance doesn't matter a huge deal. We don't have amazing accuracy, or evasion, I should say, by any stretch of the imagination. But I think I will go for the troll leather. And we will be able to heal at an absolutely ridiculous rate with the help of that. In fact, if we head into our menu here, we get 2.28 health back per turn, which is absurd. Means that if we just run away from enemies, we can pretty much go up to max health every single time with just a little bit of pillar dancing. And if we start tacking on even more regeneration here, oh lord, it's gonna get absolutely ridiculous. I will back up, of course, still playing it slightly careful here, just because we have a ridiculously good start, or even maybe more so because we have such a good start. We want to be careful not to fall prey to just sheer stupidity, leading us down a bad sequence of events here. And let's see, a nice general store here early on will allow us to get a couple more scrolls of identify, also buy a scroll of noise, if just to get a free identification, or not free, but rather cheap at 14 gold. And we'll mark yet another acid wand as a potential item to buy in our future. Holy cow, not bad whatsoever. Let us go through our due diligence here and use a few more ID potions, or ID scrolls rather, on our potions. We get curing identified there, which will allow us to not be quite so worried about a poorly timed confusion or poison of any sort. Though of course poison becomes less effective the more regeneration we have, because if we can just heal past that slight damage tick, definitely does wonders. In fact, I don't know why I started running here. We're not quite done with our identification progress. We still have 4 scrolls. Jeez Louise. But after getting both of our healing potions identified, I'm going to switch over to all of our scrolls here and see what kind of stuff we can find. Of course, on our troll, again, we managed to have an early 2 scrolls of brand weapon. Isn't that awesome? Perfect timing, game. Thank you so much. Just what we needed. But we'll keep going here. And we can immediately drop that scroll of amnesia. There's almost no chance that we'll be using that. We could almost drop this potion of magic, but at the end of the day with our guardian spirit amulet, that's essentially a health potion of sorts, which might come in handy. Let's just shut this door in the dragon's face, get it to come a little bit closer at the very least. Perfect. What I probably should have done there is switched over to our acid drake scales. Made it even less risky, but I'm also completely happy with how that went. Was pretty confident that we'd just shred through that bad boy without too much regard to anything else there. And could go for another Curari dart here, or can see how effective this triple stack poison is, and in fact that is just about to do the job. Maybe I'll go 1 dart of Curari, shall we? Just to give that last bit of insurance. Perfect, you love to see that. And let's keep it moving. We can even switch our positive energy ring for that evasion ring that we just picked up. That's a nice find early on to give us that little bit extra defensive capability. And holy cow, things are just smooth sailing left and right here. I'll even drop my anti-magic battle axe again. So sorry, Trog, for not respecting your gift, but it's not what I asked for. It wasn't on my list, you know? I always tell you, Trog, stick to the list. I have very specific wants and needs, but I guess you'll just have to learn by me throwing your present into the trash here. And let's head to lair, shall we?